Good morning. I am so excited to see you this morning. Make sure you share me all over Facebook with all your friends and family. Tag the post in that and just tell us, give us your testimonies. You can send it to info@firstassembly.tv. Let us know what God is doing through these Monday Motivators for you and your family. I am now in the home stretch. We got two more in this series, and then I'll start a whole new series, and we'll just delve into some new great things. But we got some power-packed information in this piece of scripture that I want to share with you. In Ephesians chapter 6, this is how we fight our battles, and I want to share that with you. Just so excited about what God is doing in our church and in our people, and in you in particular, praying for breakthroughs for folks in our community and in the streets of Colombia and around the world. How many of you know God is doing some amazing, amazing things? So check this out. Ephesians 6, we've been walking through some stories here with what Paul is talking about in the armor of God. We're talking about how we fight our battles. How do we fight? We talk a lot about fighting warfare in our history classes in school. We talk about the art of war at the academies in our country. We talk about a lot of things like that in our nation. If you watch the news, there's a lot about war and the possibility of war and all those things. And so we understand war is a physical reality. It's something that happens. We watch a lot of movies about war, but there's also a war that's happening that we don't see, that our eyes can't comprehend. And that warfare is so much more important than the warfare we see that's a physical war. It is the war for the souls of man. The enemy, like I said last week, has come to steal, to kill, and to destroy. But the scripture also says that Jesus has come to give us life, and to give us life more abundantly. He didn't come to give us a half life or a part life, but He came to give us a full life. I know it's hard for me sometimes to comprehend how God could care so much about me that He would care how my life goes. But He does. Even though I've made mistakes, even though I've hurt people, and I've said things I shouldn't say, and I've done things I shouldn't do, He still loves me, and He still loves you. He cares about every detail of our life. The scripture tells us that He knows how many hairs are on our head. For some of us, that's harder to count than others, right? But He cares about every detail. He cares about everything to do with you. He cares about what football team you like. He cares about how many kids you have. He cares about how they're doing. There's no detail of your life that God is not invested and interested in. But more importantly than the details that you don't care about is the heart for God that He wants to create in you. The desire for relationship. Romance is an important thing to God. Believe it or not, He wants a personal relationship with every human in the world. And it can be personal because God is omnipresent, which means He can be fully here with me and fully there with you at the same time. I know it doesn't make sense, but He's God. He created everything with words. What makes you think He couldn't be present there for you and for me? This week we're dealing with the helmet of salvation. The helmet of salvation. What does it mean, the helmet of salvation? The helmet of salvation is simply this. It is the protective hardware that God puts over our heads. No, that's not what it is. What the helmet of salvation is the trust we have in our salvation. That we can look back and say, look what God's done in my life. Look at how my life's turned out. It may not be where I want to be, but man, look where He's brought me from. The helmet of salvation returns us to the place of our salvation. I know so many times that I have to remember what God has brought me through to withstand the attacks of the enemy on my mind today. I can tell you in particular, I was saved at 15 years old from a life that was kind of rough, 14, 15. I was getting into a lot of trouble. I was getting into a lot of fights at school. And even though I knew Jesus and I knew about Jesus, I really wasn't committed to what He wanted me to commit to. But when I remembered the goodness of what He had done in me and what He was doing through me, I began to realize that I couldn't live for the temporary world that I was existing in, but I had to live for a bigger purpose. I reminded myself of how good God was to deliver me and to save me. That's what communion is all about. When the Scripture commands us to take communion as often as we will, we eat the bread and we drink the wine to remember His great sacrifice for us. And this is what happens when we remember the testimony. Revelation says we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Listen, remind yourself, rehearse in your mind. This is the protective layer that protects your head. This is the helmet of salvation, is that we go back to the place where we're delivered. We don't remember how far we've come from. Listen, some of you have come a long, long way. Some of you were saved last week, but God, you still got a testimony to share of stuff God's delivered you from. Some of you have been saved for 3 decades, and you've forgotten what God's brought you out of. It's so important that we can have the helmet of salvation, the reminder that says, you know what? I may not be where I want to be, but I'm a lot further than I would have been without God on my side. Remember, the best is yet to come.